Social Security updates are something you should understand well before retirement arrives. Right now, there's a piece of legislation sitting in Congress that hardly anyone seems to be discussing. Honestly, that surprises me because this directly impacts millions of people across the United States who are already retired or expecting to retire within the next several years. When I first learned about it, I started searching online to see who was covering the story, and I was shocked by how little information I could find. That lack of attention is exactly why I wanted to take some time today and walk through everything together. Before we talk about the bill itself, it's important to understand why Social Security plays such a major role in retirement planning. More than half of retired Americans depend on Social Security to cover at least 50% of their monthly expenses. And among workers who are preparing for retirement right now, most expect those payments to become an important source of income once they stop working. Because of that, even small adjustments made by Congress can create real financial consequences for everyday people. The legislation we're discussing today is House Bill 5284. At first, the proposal may sound incredibly minor. According to the official summary, the bill would require the Social Security Administration to update certain terminology used in rules, regulations, guidance, and other official materials. Put simply, this is a bill focused on changing specific words. It changes the labels attached to important retirement ages. At first glance, you might wonder why that matters at all. But stay with me, because by the end of this discussion, I think you'll understand why these wording changes could be far more important than they initially appear. Let's start with what the bill actually proposes. There are three main terminology updates included in the legislation, and we should look at each one carefully. The first change would replace the phrase early eligibility age with the term minimum benefit age. Currently, age 62 is officially considered the early eligibility age because it is the earliest age when someone can begin collecting Social Security retirement benefits. Under this proposal, that same age would instead be called the minimum benefit age. Supporters of the bill argue that this wording better explains what happens financially when someone claims benefits at 62. If you file at that age, you permanently lock in the smallest monthly benefit available to you. Specifically, someone who claims at 62 receives roughly 30% less than they would receive if they waited until reaching full retirement age. The second terminology change would replace full retirement age with the phrase standard benefit age. Most people in financial planning circles refer to full retirement age as FRA. Depending on the year you were born, that age currently falls somewhere between 66 and 67. It represents the age when you qualify for your complete unreduced Social Security benefit. Under this legislation, that same milestone would instead be renamed the standard benefit age. The third change would replace delayed retirement age with maximum benefit age. Today, age 70 represents the point where Social Security benefits reach their highest possible level. For every year someone delays collecting benefits after reaching full retirement age, their monthly payment increases by approximately 8% annually. By the time a person reaches 70, their monthly benefit equals around 124% of what they would have received at full retirement age. Under the proposed bill, this age would be referred to as the maximum benefit age. Now we come to the bigger question. Do these wording changes actually matter in any meaningful way? In one sense, the answer is no. The actual retirement ages are not changing. The percentages are staying exactly the same. The calculations behind Social Security benefits remain identical, regardless of whether we call age 62 the early eligibility age or the minimum benefit age. If someone files for benefits at 62 today, they still receive roughly 70% of their full retirement benefit. If this bill becomes law, they would still receive that same 70%. The structure of the system itself would remain unchanged. But language influences the way people think. There's a reason companies and marketers spend huge amounts of money deciding what to call products and services. Different words create different emotional reactions. The term minimum feels very different from the word early. If you hear that claiming benefits at 62 means accepting the minimum benefit, your brain immediately interprets that as something less desirable, something that should probably be avoided if possible. Meanwhile, the phrase early eligibility sounds far more neutral and maybe even somewhat positive, almost like gaining access to a benefit ahead of schedule. The same thing applies to changing full retirement age into standard benefit age. The word full suggests completeness, fulfillment, and receiving everything you earned. The word standard feels much more ordinary, more average, more like a basic starting point. Those emotional impressions are not the same at all. Likewise, calling age 70 the maximum benefit age instead of the delayed retirement age changes the way people emotionally process waiting longer. Maximum sounds rewarding and beneficial. Delayed sounds like postponement and sacrifice. So yes, the wording matters. But the more important issue is not simply why these particular labels were selected. The deeper question is whether this bill could be laying the groundwork for future policy changes later on. Here's the concern I want you to think about carefully. When governments adjust official terminology, it's often not only about improving clarity. Sometimes those language changes also make future policy adjustments easier to explain and easier for the public to accept. Consider the history of Social Security itself. When the program was first created, the full retirement age was 65. Over time, Congress gradually increased that age to 66 and later to 67 for individuals born after 1960. Every time lawmakers increased the retirement age, it effectively reduced lifetime benefits because people had to wait longer before qualifying for their full payment amount. If the standard benefit age, which is what this bill would call it, were eventually pushed from 67 to 68, 69, or even 70 at some point in the future, that would represent a major shift for retirees and workers approaching retirement. And if policymakers introduced that change using the new terminology, it might become easier to frame politically. They could argue that they are merely adjusting the age when people receive the standard benefit. They could say benefits are not being eliminated because the minimum benefit age would still remain available at 62. The maximum benefit age would still stay at 70. The only thing changing would be the middle category. That type of framing could make a substantial benefit reduction sound much less dramatic. And that possibility is worth paying attention to as this legislation continues moving through Congress. Now let's move into something else that I think doesn't get nearly enough attention. The mathematics behind deciding when to claim Social Security are far more complicated than most online calculators or mainstream financial advice would lead you to believe. Here's the general breakdown of how your benefit changes depending on the age when you file. If you claim at 62, you receive around 70% of your full retirement benefit. At 63, you receive about 75%. At 64, you receive roughly 80%. At 65, you collect approximately 86.7%. At 66, you receive around 93.3%. At 67, which is currently the full retirement age for many Americans, you receive 100% of your scheduled benefit. At 68, your payment rises to roughly 108%. At 69, it increases to about 116%. And by age 70, you reach approximately 124%. As of January 2025, the average monthly Social Security payment was slightly below $2,000 per month. Meanwhile, the maximum possible benefit for someone retiring at full retirement age in 2025 was a little above $4,000 monthly. This is where many people make an important mental mistake. They look at those percentages and immediately conclude that waiting longer is automatically the smartest decision. But that conclusion only works if you focus exclusively on the total amount collected over a lifetime without considering what someone could potentially do with the money received earlier. Let's talk about the break-even analysis that many people misunderstand. The typical argument for delaying Social Security works like this. If you file early, your monthly checks are smaller. If you wait longer, your checks become larger. Eventually, there comes a point where the total amount collected by the person who waited becomes greater than the total amount collected by the person who claimed early. That point is commonly known as the break-even age. In many situations, it falls somewhere around age 78 to 80, depending on the exact numbers involved. Because of that, conventional retirement advice often says that if you expect to live beyond 80 years old, delaying benefits probably makes sense. If you expect a shorter lifespan, filing earlier might be the better option. But here's the major flaw in that standard analysis. It usually assumes that the person collecting early benefits earns absolutely no return on that money. In other words, it assumes someone claiming benefits at 62 immediately spends every dollar from every monthly payment. There's no investing, no saving, and no compounding included in the equation. Once you adjust that assumption, the math changes dramatically. If someone claims benefits early and invests even part of those payments while earning just a modest 2% annual return, the break-even age moves closer to 81 years old. If the annual return rises to around 4%, the break-even point barely occurs at all. At 5% annual returns, the difference between filing early and filing late becomes surprisingly small, even well into someone's 90s. That leads to another important question. Is earning 4 to 5% annually actually difficult without taking major financial risks? As of 2025, United States Treasury securities, which are considered extremely low risk because they are backed by the federal government, were yielding approximately 3.7 to 4.4% annually. That means someone could theoretically claim Social Security early, place that money into Treasury securities, collect interest with very limited credit risk, and weaken much of the traditional argument for delaying benefits. So, who should file early, and who might benefit more from waiting? This is where retirement planning becomes highly personal, and it's important to understand that no single strategy works perfectly for everyone. Every financial situation is unique. Still, I think there's a practical framework worth considering. First, let's discuss situations where claiming benefits early may actually make sense. One example is when filing at 62 would allow someone to retire significantly earlier while they are still healthy and active enough to fully enjoy those years. There's tremendous value in having both free time and good health at the same stage of life. If waiting until 67 means having more monthly income but fewer energetic years left to enjoy retirement, that trade-off deserves honest consideration. Another situation involves people who reasonably believe their life expectancy may be shorter than average. Family histories involving serious illnesses, existing medical conditions, or other health concerns may make filing earlier the more rational financial decision. A third situation is when someone has enough financial discipline and investment knowledge to put those earlier payments to productive use rather than spending every dollar immediately. Now let's look at situations where waiting longer may be the better choice. The clearest case involves strong family longevity. If your parents or grandparents regularly lived into their late 80s or 90s, there's a meaningful possibility you may also live a very long life. For most Americans, Social Security represents the only retirement income source that is both guaranteed and adjusted for inflation. Those payments increase with rising living costs. They cannot be outlived. They are not dependent on stock market performance. The longer you expect to live, the more valuable that guaranteed inflation-adjusted income becomes. Because of that, maximizing the monthly payment by delaying benefits can act as a form of protection against longevity risk. Now let's discuss another issue that deserves far more attention in retirement conversations. Average life expectancy and healthy life expectancy are not identical measurements. The World Health Organization tracks a statistic called healthy life expectancy, which estimates not only how long people live, but how many of those years are spent in relatively good health. In the United States, healthy life expectancy is approximately 66.1 years. That's only slightly beyond the traditional retirement age of 65. Compare that with countries such as Japan, Singapore, South Korea, Switzerland, Spain, France, and several others, where healthy life expectancy reaches 72 years or more. What this means in practical terms is that many Americans spend most of their healthiest years working. By the time retirement finally arrives, a large portion of their healthiest and most active years may already be gone. And if future policy changes push the standard benefit age even higher, more people could end up working during the exact years when they are physically most capable of enjoying travel, hobbies, family time, and the activities that make retirement meaningful. This is not a minor issue. Retirement rates across the United States have steadily declined for decades among nearly every age group. Among Americans between ages 55 and 59, retirement rates have dropped from almost 20% in the early 2000s to roughly 11% today. Among people aged 65 to 69, retirement rates have fallen from around 76% to approximately 70%. Fewer Americans are retiring, and those who do retire are generally doing so later in life. Any future policy changes that make early filing less attractive or increase the full benefit age could accelerate this trend even further. So why should you take all of this seriously? Here's the bottom line. House Bill 5284 may appear to be nothing more than a small administrative update focused on terminology. And maybe that's ultimately all it will become. But it still deserves close attention because the language we use absolutely shapes the way people think and respond to future proposals. If Americans spend years becoming accustomed to viewing age 67 as the standard benefit age rather than the full retirement age, it becomes psychologically easier for lawmakers to later increase that standard age. The conversation becomes much simpler politically. Policymakers could argue that they are not reducing benefits at all. Instead, they would say they are only adjusting the age when people receive the standard benefit. That's an important concern, especially when we consider declining retirement rates, healthy life expectancy trends, and the heavy dependence many Americans have on Social Security for financial stability during retirement. So, what should you do right now? Stay informed. Run your own calculations carefully. Don't rely entirely on simple online calculators that assume early benefits earn no investment return. Think seriously about your own health, your family history, your financial circumstances, and what retirement personally means to you. Social Security decisions are not one size fits all. The right choice depends on many factors that no government bill and no generic retirement calculator can completely account for. But understanding the rules, including the subtle ways Congress may change how those rules are described and presented, gives you a much stronger chance of making a retirement decision you'll feel confident about for the rest of your life. Stay informed, keep paying attention, and continue asking thoughtful questions.